All right, welcome back to the Homestead. All right, guys, we did it. We just bombed Iran. So at least 3 of their major nuclear sites have been hit. I don't think there's been anything official as of yet from Iran, but we do have talk and bluster from Iranian TV. Of course, it doesn't sound good. One of the statements was, "Mr. Trump, you started it, we will end it." Another statement that came from their TV was, "Every American citizen or military member is now a legitimate target." So, yay, awesome. Here we go. So we're going to get into a video about, in my opinion, why that's not a good thing. Maybe tie that into a little bit of scriptural prophecy. Talk about the cyber capacities of Iran, who in retaliation could do much as they target one of millions of cyber locations in America. We're talking about power grids or hospitals, etc. And we're just going to talk about what America has become and why a homestead or why preparations is something that you should be about. All right, but here we go. Let's get right into it. Okay, guys, why the video from a homestead, right? Well, I'll tell you why. This concerns me. I'm a MAGA guy. I went to a Trump rally. One of my good friends spoke at the Trump rally. We're both very MAGA people, but we're for the principles of MAGA. We're not here to irrevocably support one candidate, even though I've liked a lot of what Mr. Trump has done. So President Trump in his first administration got in no wars, and that's part of the reason why I enthusiastically voted for him again. But to have this war concerns me on multiple levels, okay? Let me just talk about this. I'm old enough as a little boy to remember when we went to war in Iraq. And it was a big deal, and it was awesome because we had the shock and awe. Remember that? George Bush was our president, and shock and awe, and we blew Iraq to smithereens. Why? Because they had weapons of mass destruction. You know, yellow cake. Remember Colin Powell? He came and he says they have yellow cake. And we have to go to war, and we got to go blow the whole country apart and go find the weapons of mass destruction. All right, here's the time of reckoning. Every single one of you, Republican or Democrat, we all come together right now as fellow homesteaders, fellow humans, and acknowledge this fact. There was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. 0. It was all a lie. Oh, crap. Well, who told that lie? America. Okay, guys, that is the truth. And that's why I want to thread this back into what is really, in my opinion, one of my most important messages is that America was set up as a land of liberty. Our Constitution is a heavenly banner inspired by God. Our founding fathers maybe they weren't perfect men, but they were men who established a form of government that has done more to uplift and ennoble and inspire the world than any other government ever. And then what? Well, fast forward and we're to the point to where we think that we can go and start wars like we did in Iraq, when we had the premise of weapons of mass destruction, which was our lie. And if you're honest with yourself, you're probably not sufficiently upset with our government lying to you about weapons of mass destruction, right? Because we didn't learn that lesson, we also didn't learn the lesson of COVID and the lessons of the vaccine. Because America was the great deceiver when it came to COVID. Our CIA ran interference on admitting that just anybody that was pointing out the obvious, hey, this virus has leapt several generations and is the product of gain of function. So why did our central intelligent people run interference from the world understanding that truth? So we now know that's true, but the last 5 years, you talked about it, you were considered a conspiracy theorist, and your First Amendment privileges were actually shut down. We come to find out that, again, the American intelligentsia, the government, was the one telling Facebook and other social media platforms to control that narrative that gain of function was false and that the Wuhan virus, as funded by the NIH, National Institute of Health, Fauci, that none of that is true, except it is. And so now we fast forward and we know it's all legit. And again, going back to Iraq, have we been sufficiently ticked that we lied to the world? Now, I'm not saying Saddam Hussein was a good guy. That's irrelevant. I do know, however, as bad as it might have been in Iraq, it was a lot worse after we bombed the living crap out of that nation, according to the American lie. What does all that have to do with Mystery Babylon and a homestead? Here we go. I've talked before about Revelation 18. It's a prophecy that I believe is about America. America being a land of liberty, a land that Washington covenanted with God, that we would serve him if he would bless us. Have we broken that covenant? I think we have. And if we have broken that covenant, what happens when you violate your covenant you made with God? Our very president made a covenant that we would serve him. And you don't have to get into all the social issues, guys, but it is June, and there's much we could talk about when it comes to that. But as we have turned our back on him, what's going to happen to our protection? Now, the prophecy in Revelation 18 talks about a great city, one of the greatest cities on earth, and it's called Mystery Babylon. So it's not ancient Babylon. This Babylon, in my opinion, is in a modern context. It's a sea-bearing city because it talks about all these great ships that are watching this great city, which I believe is New York. You know, New York was the very place where Washington covenanted with God that we would serve him. It's also the very place to where when he made that covenant and the very first act as president with his Congress and his Senate, go watch the videos of Jonathan Cahn and the Harbinger. So the very spot that George Washington is president with, right after meeting with Congress and Senate, and he goes and consecrates this ground, was on the literal courtyard of the Twin Towers. It was the place of consecration of America. And Jonathan Cahn talks about how the symbol of us getting hit in those towers, that is actually a sign of judgment and impending warning from God, that he doesn't destroy a place until he warns it that, hey, you're in apostasy. I would argue that Mr. Cahn is right on the money. We have been turning our back on God, and the place where we covenanted with him to serve him is the place where he just warned us back during 9/11. And so if that's true, then it seems to me very fitting that Mystery Babylon, that great city, would also be New York City, the place of our founding. Not Pennsylvania, not Washington. New York was the place of that covenant, right? And so if Mystery Babylon is New York, and it is a great port city, also it's where all of America finances is at. It's the place of our economic hub. It's a port city. During COVID, it was one of the most important cities where things were first falling apart. It's where we got hit almost the hardest during COVID. And so the prophecy talks about in 1 hour that great city's destroyed. It talks about a great millstone that is sunk into the ocean, and that from it destroys the city. You're like, well, wait, millstones in the ocean, how does it destroy the city? And my speculation, I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again now, has always been, well, what about the Poseidon missile? That's where we're threading back in with Iran, because they possess those kind of technologies. The Poseidon missile is a missile that is equipped with a payload capable of creating a nuclear tsunami. So you basically take the evil devices of man, couple it with Mother Nature, and creating a tsunami that can then wipe out parts of the eastern seaboard. And I mean, that sounds crazy, but well, I don't know what it is. I'm just speculating for a second there. But the Bible prophesies of a great millstone that's thrown into the ocean that is in part of what destroys the great city in 1 hour. And from that great city being destroyed, it talks about the voice of the Lord. I would say that's communication. The voice is heard no more. An eerie thing is it says the candle shines no more, which I believe is electricity. So there's these great judgments that comes from that great city being destroyed. And is that all tied with the war? I think it is in part. I think it's all these things. At the very end of that revelation, it basically, in my opinion, gives the trigger point. It says, for by Mystery Babylon, which I believe is America, by her pharmakia were all the nations of the earth deceived. Excuse me. It actually says sorcery, but the root word for sorcery is not Harry Potter. The root word for sorcery is pharmakia. It's medicine. Has America been involved in a great deception when it comes to medicine? Not just COVID, think vaccine. Because these many years later, churches and governments and nations are waking up to what the heck? We took America's lead, the lead of these great companies, Moderna and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, all of which have these massive headquarters in the great city, New York. And you cannot suppress that information leaking out to nations and governments and organizations and churches. People are waking up to that, and people are ticked because people are sick. People are getting sick. The ramifications of that great deception are horrible. And we're all in that together, whether you took it or not. It doesn't matter. We've been prevailed upon by deception and evil. And I think that's what Revelation 18 is talking about. So as we get all giddy that, yay, we're going to destroy Iran just like we destroyed Iraq. Why are we there? Why are we there? I liked my guy when I voted for him the first time because he kept us out of wars. He's been very consistent. He doesn't want Iran to hold a nuclear bomb, but we've been whining about Iran's nuclear capacities forever. And by the way, when the last time we really kind of messed with Iran, do you remember that when the Stuxnet virus was released across the whole globe? This was 15 plus years ago. This virus, one of the greatest viruses to ever inflict computers across the whole globe. People were watching it and it was going into every nation, but it wasn't doing anything. But it was a sophisticated state-sponsored virus called Stuxnet. And it did nothing until it went to its design location, which was beyond the firewall into the Iranian nuclear program. So someone carried it with a thumb drive through their firewall, and it went into the Iranian firewall. And the Stuxnet in their system then actuated. It turned on. And it was designed arguably by Israel and America, the same players that just bombed the crap out of Iran, to go down and to melt down their nuclear reactors while telling upstairs, oh, all is well, our nuclear program's going fine. So they had no idea that somebody had just absolutely decimated their nuclear program down below. So, okay, good. Oh, wow, whoever did that, you're my hero. Okay, fine. But from that, what happened is Iran launched one of its greatest initiatives and created one of the greatest nations with some of the greatest cyber technologies on this earth. Cyber technologies, I'm talking about hacking. I'm talking about kill switches, ability to shut down power grids, to go into hospitals and infrastructure, power grids, as well as hospitals, as well as whatever. We know that we have a vulnerability in our grids, but the thing is it's kind of it's like a lone wolf attack. There's literally tens of millions of places that these cyber attacks could occur. And I would argue to you that as we are gleeful, just like we were during shock and awe with Iraq, the ramifications of that was we toppled a government and it went into civil anarchy and it was a horrible deal. Well, now that we've just done this to their 3 nuclear sites, we might think, oh yeah, we're awesome. Well, are we? Because now what happens? We just went to the bear and we just lashed at him and we're we just bloodied his face. Well, now we're going to see what happens when that big old claw with those big old talons come back at us. And it's not going to be traditional warfare, guys. That's my point. My point is we could be hit one of a million ways. Maybe it's just, oh, let's just take out the grid in Arizona, you know, scorching heat. What happens to them? Well, if you're without power in some of these places for even just a week to 2 weeks, you know, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who could be not just affected. You're talking about death. You're talking about 9/11 style death. So I hope I'm wrong and that this doesn't spur a bunch of rogue, lone wolf, digital cyber attacks. But that is what I'm saying. And I am also saying that we are the great nation that just deceived the world through our pharmakia, which seems very eerily spot on, right on the money with what the great Mystery Babylon did in Revelation 18 right before it was humbled with its own humbling, with its own shaking. So I'm sitting here in my greenhouse and I'm sitting here on my homestead and I'm threading the needle for you. You and I can do much within our power in small and simple ways and try to prepare and insulate so we can protect and provide for our families. Because if you're waiting for governments to make right decisions and to not be deceptive and to not start wars and not engage in wars and not poke the bear, if you think that is your way to peace, you're going to be sorely disappointed. I think it's time to buckle up. So good luck out there. We'll see you in the next video.